Hello Exile, it's me again, and I bring some really good news. 0.2e is just around the corner. In fact, it's actually being deployed tomorrow. And this will contain all the major changes, bug fixes, balances, you name it, that will make Dawn of the Hunt a bit more bearable. And it needs to be. So without further ado, we're going to hop straight into the upcoming changes, starting off with the monster speed changes. This is something that many players have complained about since Dawn of the Hunt actually started. They inherently slowed us down with the specific intention for us to engage in more meaningful combat, combos, that sort of thing. But the monsters just stayed fast and they bum rushed us at every given opportunity. So what they're doing is during the campaign, they're going to be slowing down a couple of the monsters that are already inherently fast just to make our campaign experience a bit smoother. Human monsters like the Cultist and Freythorn, the Faradin, and the Tribal Humans, they have attacks where they can interrupt their melee attacks if the player moves too far out of range. So basically, they just keep going at you, and you've all experienced this, I'm pretty sure. So these interrupt events have been primarily removed, especially on things that were attacking very fast, as it caused monsters to be relentlessly able to pursue and attack you, giving you no time to engage or use skills between their attacks. That is a given. It was horrific. Act 2 was a wild one when you're dealing with the Faradin monsters because of that relentless attack. The haste aura modifier no longer appears on monsters that are already fast. Okay, I was doing maps prior to creating this video, and I kid you not, every single map featured at least 3 rares that were all monsters that were already incredibly fast, that had siphon mana and haste on them. Make it make sense. But anyway, I'm glad that they are going to be changing the fact that haste aura no longer spawns on monsters that are already fast because they don't need to be faster. Act 1, werewolf prowlers and tendril prowlers now will enter a walking stance as opposed to running. After performing a melee action, they will only begin running again if you get a certain distance away from them. This behavior has been applied to many faster monsters. That's really nice. Hungering Stalkers now have 12% less life and damage. They were already relatively weak, but we have lowered it a bit further to account for their high movement speed and base attack speed. Doesn't matter if they're weak, they can still swarm you. They are intended to engage and attack quickly, but be weak and die fast. Reduce the number of Bloom Serpents in Red Veil. Oh my gosh, thank goodness, no more poison Gatling guns. Halve the number of venomous crabs in the hunting grounds, also very nice. The poison darts just wouldn't stop. Cultists and Freythorn no longer have interrupt events on their attacks as described above. Okay, so just a couple of changes here. Blood cretins on death pools have had their duration decreased from 6 to 4 seconds, fixed the area of effect to match the visual more closely, and reduced the overall density of more challenging monsters in Argon Manor. Not bad. Really solid changes to Act 1. I think all these monsters that they've identified were the problem ones. So I think this would help Act 1 just go a bit more smoother, because I think when launch started, some people were in Act 1 for hours, which is crazy. Anyway, Act 2. The boulder ants in Titan Valley have been replaced by risen Maraketh, as the area already had too many monsters that had irritating movement. That's pretty big. Faradin have all been modified to remove the interrupt events on their attacks as described above. It's specifically the Faradin Blade Dancers. You know, the guys with 4 swords who just don't damn stop? Yeah, it sucks. Act 3. Dire Tusk Boar and Ant Lion charges are more likely to push you to the side instead of pushing you along with them. Thank you. This is something that absolutely needed to change. These Ant Lions just took you for a ride through different space and time continuum for you to emerge on the other side in another pack of monsters. It sucked. The Lost City monster pack composition has been adjusted to result in less ranged monsters. Not bad. Massively adjusted the Azak Bog. Okay. Firstly, by the aforementioned changes to interrupt events, but also changed the monster composition of the area to have less ranged and elite monsters. And I dare say, they gotta make that map smaller. Fixed an issue where the Slither Spitter's poison spray in Venom Crypt was dealing chaos damage instead of physical damage unintentionally. Fascinating. We've also identified another issue that affects some areas in which potential monster spawn locations have inconsistent density in different rooms. This leads to situations where some rooms are much denser with monsters than others in an unintended way. We have a fix for this problem, but it did not make it into this patch and will be deployed in a later patch. I have noticed this throughout the campaign, I think also throughout maps sometimes, but maps is kind of intended. The point is, it needs to change in campaign. These are not the only changes that they'll be making to monsters. Further changes will come in later updates, and some changes did not basically make it into these patches, which is okay. They're already putting in a lot of work to remedy some of the things that needed to be changed. Boss changes. Viper. Probably one of the hardest bosses in the acts. Just a short stroll through any of the global chats, there will be at least a handful of people asking for help with Viper who are still leveling. She is tough, her arena is small, she spits out a gargantuan amount of projectiles, but that's intended, it's kind of the fun. But she is most definitely one of the more challenging bosses, I do agree here. So they made the following change. They lowered the amount and size of her chaos reigns, the big purple circles, which basically filled the entire arena, and basically cleaned up the leftover visuals faster, which is huge, because when she fills the arena, it's really hard to telegraph and work out who, what, when, how, while trying to dodge her attacks as well. So that's really nice, because you barely have a fraction of the arena to actually stand in. Uxmal, my baby boy, had various quirks that made him somewhat annoying to fight. It's a chimera after all, they're always annoying to fight. We've made a few changes. Reduce the number of times Uxmal changes locations throughout the fight. Remember, Uxmal is the chimera that is in the Trial of Chaos, not Zyclusion, however you say that. He is the one that you encounter during the axe. Uxmal can no longer recharge energy shield while in the air, that's great, and he uses his flame breath less often. That's the one where he flies up in the air and just flaps his little wings, glides his way through, and he just makes him very hard to hit. So, I'm happy. The arena of Psych has had its ground foliage removed in order to make effects more visible. Great. Nice changes to the two chimeras. Player minion changes. As I said in the previous video, I wanted to start this league with Spectres, and the way minions were launched weren't exactly in the best of states. You know, they had HP issues and all that stuff. All of that is being remedied, which is really cool. But they're making some changes to the revive counters, which is big. We've changed the way that minion revive timers work. When your minion first dies, it sets the revive timer to 7.5 seconds as before. But with each successive minion that dies, it increases it by less and less, still capped to a maximum of 7.5. This should heavily mitigate the situation where most of your minions are dead, but the revive timer keeps resetting to 7.5 seconds over and over. That's quite nice, especially for the Spectres. Speaking of Spectres, this is probably one of the biggest changes for people who typically use Bind Spectre or Tame Beast. I see a lot of people using Tame Beast, especially those that are playing Huntress and maybe some other builds. Disenchanting Bind Spectre or Tame Beast will unbind them, meaning you can actually use them again, as in the gem, which is great because you have to keep plowing through gems to find Spectres, etc., which is really irritating. And Tame Beasts can now fit through gaps of the same size that the player can. Nice for when you have tamed the bigger beasties, and now they can actually follow you through doors. Other player balances. So aside from all the previous changes that they're going to be making to specific ascendancies, classes, skills, more so, they don't have a lot to add to this one, but they did make a couple of changes, little sneaky ones. Rally support is no longer restricted to strikes or slams and can now support any melee attack you use yourself. Nice for my warriors out there. Glory, used by Hammer of the Gods and the Spear of Solaris, is now no longer consumed if you are interrupted while using the skill. That's pretty big. And fixed a bug where blood boils from the Ritualist Ascendancy didn't propagate if the monster exploded on death, such as when using Herald of Blood. Okay. Now, crafting changes. We have now finished adding all the mods to runes for caster weapons. Desert, Glacial, Storm, Iron, Body, Mind, Rebirth, Inspiration, Stone, and Vision runes now all work on staves and wands with their own set of modifiers. If you look at the previous video and also the previous patch notes, they spoke about doing this, and this is something that was in dire need of happening. because I never understood why the game was initially released without that ability, but I'm happy that they're adding it in sooner rather than later. Renly's abandoned shop in the Burning Village now also has a blank rune, which Renly can forge into any elemental rune of your choosing, in case you didn't find any up to that point. And obviously the 12 Artificier's orbs now drop at fixed locations throughout the campaign. That's really cool. That's enough for a full set of armor and some change, which is quite nice. Performance improvements. I would love to see more of these in the future, but the ground foliage in many areas has had an optimization pass to improve performance. That's huge. Charm changes. Okay. This is something that needed to be expanded on and worked on. I do agree here. It's a system that they never adequately worked on, and they've had several problems that we finally will be addressing. Overall, they want charms to be more useful and want you to get more use out of them. Changes to the charm slots. So before we dive into the rest here, throughout my entire time playing PoE 2, I've only ever found 3 belts that have an extra charm slot. And I picked up a lot of belts and rolled a lot of belts. So charm slots on belts are now granted by implicit mods that are added to belts depending on the level of the area that dropped them. This is great. This is good news. Nice to have something more than just a freezing charm. The number of slots is random, up to a cap depending on how high the level of the belt is. You can use a divine orb to reroll the number of slots, and belts have 1 charm slot until level 32, 2 to level 64, and 3 from 65 onwards. It's really nice. Unique belts can always have up to 3 charm slots. For now, unique belts with mods that increase the number of charms will still be capped to 3. Later on, they'll remove the cap. This is really good. Several charms were not protecting you from the hit that activated them. These cases have been fixed to work properly. We've also done a pass on charm mods to make them more powerful and rewarding. This is really great. I like the charm system. It's a bit different from using flasks in PoE 1. I do like the charms. It's a nice sort of fire and forget way of doing things. You don't have to stress so much about having to activate the charm. So I'm really happy that they're making these changes. But stash tab affinities. We're adding stash tab affinities for the following categories of items. Socketables. Fragments, which include tablets and trial keys. Breach, Expedition, Ritual. I would like to actually see stash tabs for these, but it's a start. It's a start, at least, but it would be nice to see actual stash tabs for these things because, yeah, my runes. They're just piling up and I'm running out of space. And finally, Atlas bookmarks. The final thing on this list is the ability to actually bookmark locations on the Atlas so you can find them easily later. You know, when you're going through the Atlas, you come across a specific node or cluster that you kind of maybe want to look at later on. Maybe you want to roll some towers. Now maybe with a little bit of the towers. And now for the Atlas bookmarks. They've added the ability to bookmark locations on your Atlas so you can find them easily later. This is huge because I'm pretty sure that we've all experienced this. When you are in your Atlas and you come across a cluster that you want to come back to later, you go somewhere else and you completely forgot, or you're spending ages just dragging around the screen trying to find where the cluster is. This will change it. You can at least bookmark it. You can have up to 16 bookmarks at a time, and they will appear as icons around the outside of the screen with a direction allowing you to scroll easily, or you can click on them to instantly take you there. And you can view the list of bookmarks under the legend and click on them to go there. That's great. That is cool. That is cool. I agree. Add star. But these changes are really good. Coupled with the previous changes that they made in previous announcements, I'm really looking forward to see how this fleshes out. Early access has been a rough start so far, but I think with these changes, they're going to make a big difference. It'll take time. It'll take some time to get through it all, through all the feedback, but we will get there. And that's it for all of the upcoming changes. I'm really, really excited to see where this goes. I know early access has been less than stellar. There's been a lot of negativity around and all that stuff, but it takes time. These are really good changes. It's going to really impact the way that we play Path of Exile in a good way. And it's going to make a whole experience a lot better so that when the game actually launches, we'll be in a much better place. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around. And if you did like the video, please drop a like and subscribe. I shall see y'all in the next one. Stay sane, Exile.